Hey everyone, welcome. It is Monday, the 20th of April. We're happy to have you here. Those in the interview right now and those on YouTube. Second time doing this, so still kind of noob, but we're having our information interview with Passion and Fact today. I'm Kayla Fu.
And I'm Stefan Pearls.
All right. So I'm going to go over the whole interview today. So we're starting right now, 4:05, 4:06 now. And then I'm just going to give this little overview of what's happening. 4:10, we're going to be interviewing the professionals. And the whole interview, like when we're interviewing, if you have any questions, just feel free to raise your hand and ask along the way. Since we're not having a little time for students to ask questions. And 4:55, we'll be wrapping up and students will be writing their reflections. And 5 is when we'll end the call. Here are some of our generous sponsors with this whole corona situation going on. It'll be really kind of you if you could share and get the news out there because there's always something you can do.
Just from meeting expectations so everybody knows, we show gratitude and respect for all those video chat just as much as you want to be respected as well. We are muted and our facilitator / Adriana the bouncer. I hope that name doesn't stick, Adriana. I think that like you're way more than just a bouncer, just so that you know. Although you do a great job bouncing, that's one of our ways that we keep students safe so that we make sure that there's no one jumping into these Zoom calls. Go ahead and just raise your hand and Adriana can unmute you. And so what that looks like is if you click that button that says participants, I want everybody to do this now just to make sure that you know how to do it. We're only going to be accepting questions via raised hand today, no longer on the questions on in the chat box. We want to make sure that you get a chance to introduce yourself as well as say hi. So make sure you raise your hand. Jennifer, did you raise yours? Kiara, did you raise yours? Boom, nice. Kiara, I think you probably, did you? I'm not sure if you already did yet. All right, cool. Elaine's got it. Nice. Awesome. All right, Kiara, if you have any issues, just let us know, all right? Then no nudity, vulgar or demeaning language, or inappropriate sharing of your screen will be tolerated. We do reserve the right to remove any individual from our programs. We do want to make sure that this is a safe place for adults and for students specifically. With that, have fun and stay engaged. So without further ado, I'm going to start off by introducing Elaine Hung, a friend of mine who graduated from Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas, one of the worst environmental places in the world in terms of snowing and hailing in the morning to bright and 80 degrees in the afternoon. Studied environmental engineering, graduated in spring of 2017, received a job offer from, I'm going to probably butcher this one, Fries and Nichols, Inc., and has been consulting with them ever since in Fort Worth, Texas. She likes to bake, cook, cozy up with 2 dogs, which are super cute, and maybe they might show up today, and is passionate about making a positive impact. Thanks for joining us, Elaine.
All right,
Thanks for having me.
Lindsay Higa. She graduated from OSU in civil engineering. Is currently a civil engineer project manager for Western Federal Lands Highway Division. And her career started at Oregon Department of Transportation as a civil engineering designer and is currently working on designing a tunnel over a highway for wildlife in Idaho. And outside of work, she enjoys mountaineering, climbing, snowboarding, traveling, hiking, and playing ultimate frisbee. And she is passionate about families and friends. Family and friends. Yeah, thank you for coming in. All right, so we're glad to have both of you here today. It's really awesome that you guys are willing to sit down for an hour just to talk to us high school students, which was pretty boring. But, you know, is there anything else you wanted to add on for yourself? Maybe who you are and what your pronouns are? Be great.
And we'll start with Elaine.
She disappeared.
Oh,
I know.
no.
Uh-oh.
Probably trying to share her screen. No way. Did she totally just drop out?
Your internet.
Lindsay, why don't you go first?
Yep.
Sure. Okay. Lindsay Higa. I identify as she, her. I grew up in Hawaii. Graduated from high school from Maui High. And yeah, I have a cat.
What?
Awesome. I was gonna go into like, since like you guys are both under like the engineering like kind of like job, but there's clearly like a big difference between the two jobs. Since Elaine isn't here, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so I guess engineering is a pretty broad term, and it covers quite a few job titles and industries and whatnot. But in terms of civil engineering, there are multiple paths that one person can take. There's transportation, which is what I took. And you can go into structural. You can go into environmental, which is what Elaine is in. Oh, here she is. We were just explaining all the different paths that one can take within the civil engineering umbrella. You can go into water resources and hydrology. Yeah, so that's just like a few right off the top of my head. You could go into geotechnical engineering, which deals with soil mechanics. But yeah, Elaine, we were just introducing ourselves. I think she's connecting to audio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Technical difficulties are definitely part of this game.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah.
That being said, yeah, so go for it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so like this umbrella is massive. It doesn't have to be that you say, I want to become an engineer and you have to go in this direction. You could say, I want to become an engineer and then branch out in so many different areas.
Right. I mean, and you can go into computer, electrical. Yeah, those two. Mechanical. Okay. Quite a bit.
So what do you do like specifically for you? Like what do you do? And like do you build like just build tunnels? Like it sounds kind of like yeah, but you want to go in more like depth with that?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess in my bio that just like highlighted one specific project I'm working on, but typically I'm working on a handful of projects all at the same time. And what I do on a daily basis, or just like in general, civil engineering is designing and building infrastructure, at least the transportation realm. And so we design projects for public infrastructure. So there's highway projects, bridges, big culverts, tunnels, like you mentioned. And so that specific project, there is a highway in Idaho that cuts through a forest, and there's a lot of roadkill on that highway because that's where animals live. And so we're building a tunnel so that the wildlife can cross over the tunnel and the cars can go through it, so the cars aren't hitting the animals anymore.
Yeah,
so one example of a project.
It's like literally a tunnel that goes over a highway.
I mean, yeah, there's tunnels all over the place. It's like not anything unique, except this tunnel, the animals will be able to like, depends on where it's located. It's kind of located like lower than the hillside around it. And so it will just basically be connecting the hillside so that it's seamless for the animals that live in that forest.
That's super cool.
I know. That sounds awesome. Like in biology, like we did this project where we like designed our own like little like way for like animals to travel from a distance to one place to another where like the human life wouldn't like kill them or anything like that. And my group, we worked on otters, we picked the animal otters. So then we had like the land up here, and then there's like this tunnel that goes down under the water. So then the otters would swim over and not get like hit, and that was really awesome.
I like that.
Hey, Elaine is back, and so what we were talking about was, how about you introduce who you are and what your pronouns are, and just a little bit about your like what you do.
Okay. Well, can everyone see me and hear me? Okay, I'm sorry for the technical difficulty, but my name is Elaine Hung. I am 26 years old. My pronouns are her, she, and what I do is I tell people I'm an environmental engineer. And so within environmental engineering, there's a few different things that you can go into. And so what I do is primarily water resource recovery and water treatment.
So what is the water treatment? Like, could you go a little bit?
Water treatment, meaning like potable water. So when you like turn on the tap, that is, you know, that's what I mean by potable water.
Okay.
And then water resource recovery, that's well, it's a lot of people will just say wastewater, but I guess like the proper term is really water resource recovery. And the reason being is at a wastewater facility, what you're getting is resources like water. That's a resource. You can get energy from your wastewater. That's a resource. And so to get energy, there's a whole process, and you can basically generate methane, and you can burn that off for heat. And then there's also the solids that come out of it, which can be used for fertilizer. And it's a very, like high quality fertilizer.
That sounds awesome. That kind of reminds me of Kangen water. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Yeah,
what is that?
It's like, so you like put it to a sink, and then when you can like drink water out of it, and then there's like another tube that comes out, and then that's where the disposable water comes out from, and then that's where you use to wash dishes. And there are like little types of little buttons you can press on, like drinking water, pan water, face washing water. The minerals like come out, and it's just so cool. Yeah, I have one of those. They make me go to the bathroom a lot. But okay, all right, great, thanks y'all. Okay, usually I would start from the beginning of like the story, like high school going on to that. But today I'm gonna start from where you are now and just go back to the future. Get that reference, Back to the Future. Okay, but how did you find your current work position? What job searching avenues did you guys use? And let's start with Lindsay.
Sure. So prior to where I work today, I was working for the state government, State Department of Transportation, as a designer, and then later as a project manager. I'm not sure, does everyone live in Oregon on the call? Nice, okay. So if you've driven out I-84 eastbound, or have you gone to the gorge, not recently, but maybe within the last year? Sure, okay. So they're building this, it's called State Trail, this bike trail that goes from Portland all the way to Hood River. And so Oregon Department of Transportation is a funding partner for that project. Basically, they're just like providing some funding dollars for that. And working at ODOT, I was kind of involved in that effort. I met the project manager for that project who works for the office that I do now. And I said, oh my God, this is a cool project. I want to work on projects like these. And then I applied for a job.
That's great.
That sounds too easy almost.
Sometimes it is that easy.
Like you're already in the mix. Like you have like this network that you're already working with, and it was able just to jump from one to the next in that network.
Basically, yeah, I think networking is huge.
Cool. Caleb, back to you.
All right. What about Elaine?
Hi. So my job search was so like at my school we do, or at Texas Tech, I'm sorry, I went to Texas Tech University, and at Texas Tech there's a pretty big engineering college. When I say pretty big, it's like, I want to say it's like maybe 20-30% of the student population, which, you know, when you have like, you know, about 30,000 students or so, that's, you know, that's a pretty big chunk of people. And so a lot of schools will have engineering job fairs that are specific to engineers. And so I want to say it's like maybe like March or so, I was like, oh man, I really need a job. Like, it is time to be an adult. Like, I kind of had that moment, you know. And so I ended up getting an interview, and so that's how I got my job. But, you know, I know a lot of people, they don't necessarily get jobs from engineering job fairs. I feel like getting a job from an engineering job fair, especially with like, you know, a big company or even like a well-known company, is really difficult. If like at these job fairs, it was crowded with students, and for some companies it was like waiting in line, and it looked like waiting in line for like at least 30 minutes or an hour. So it can be tough, but I mean, I'm guessing they just looked at my resume and got me an interview. So
Yeah, sounds
everything
great.
worked out.
Do you remember specifically talking to the recruit of that company?
Yes. And I don't know if she remembers me. I have come across her. And so in Lubbock, there is a Freese and Nichols office there. And so they sent a couple people there. And I'm not really sure if she remembered me, just because there's like literally hundreds of people that she sees. So I don't necessarily feel like I stood out. You know, sometimes you walk away from something and you're like, yeah, like I did really good. But coming away from that, I was like, I don't know. That whole like engineering job fair, I was just like, I just want to be done. Let's like fast forward a few months of my life. But I got through it. Everyone gets through it.
Yeah, right when you talked about like the job fairs, I thought of like The Office, not because Lindsay has a office background, but when like, if you ever watched The Office, there was like this scene where like Michael took his like workers to the like job fair, and they couldn't like get anyone to sign up. But based from like The Office, it seems like they're selling paper, but it seems so much fun. So what would a normal day look like for you? Would it be like The Office kind of thing, or like what's the funnest part? Let's start with Lindsay.
I wish I had a Dwight in my office. I think that'd be hilarious. But no, we don't have anyone like that. Typical day for me in project management, I'd say no day really looks the same. I mean, the reason I went into project management is because it's so varied, and I get to talk to as many people as I want to. And my teams that work on my projects consist of like 10 to 15 people sometimes, and I need to be coordinating with them and talking to them, checking in on their progress on the different tasks that we have assigned to them. You know, answering questions from design team members or even stakeholders, funding partners, my boss, or I'm potentially holding meetings some days or participating in other meetings that other people hold. So I would say that like every day is just a mixture of all those things, but it never really looks the same. And it's about basically communicating and controlling the project until it's finished. So Yeah, project management is basically a fancy way of saying scheduling work to happen and checking in on the tasks that you scheduled previously.
So I was actually going to ask about that, and not to get, like, because project management is not just that. That's like the tip of the iceberg, right?
Sure.
I read a book recently called the Checklist Manifesto that details how they built a 14-story building, and the lists on lists on lists on lists of checklists that essentially are from week to week and month to month. And so for you, like, what does that aspect look like in terms of managing all these projects?
Yeah, I mean, our projects, I mean, yeah, we have lots of different tasks that go into building a tunnel, for example. And this project isn't going to be built until 2023. So it'll take us 3 years to get there. But, I mean, in any big project that you take on, you take it in small chunks and you just like plug away at it. And like, if you plan it out so that you're not overwhelmed with this huge project and take it in small steps, then it'll eventually get designed and built.
Cool. I mean, that's an immense project for sure. Like, I definitely am going to come back with more questions on this kind of long-term approach. But back to you, Kayla.
All right, thank you. Okay, so if you guys do have any questions, you can feel free to raise your hand. That's still happening. But Elaine, you should go now.
Okay, and the question was to clarify, like, what does my day-to-day look like?
And what's the funnest part?
Funnest part. Okay, well, let's just, go over like what my day-to-day looks like. So like Lindsay was saying, my job is pretty varied and it can change like from day to day. So for me, I work in consulting. And so when I say consulting, I mean that like other people will hire us and will be like, we have, we have this project for whatever reason. Maybe like there's the facility isn't very big, or maybe there's just like a lot of like items that need to be like replaced and redesigned and brought up to date, or maybe TCEQ, which is Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, which a lot of states sort of have a TCEQ kind of thing. Sorry, I'm from Texas, and they will like set like limits on what's like in your drinking water, so what you're getting is safe, and also the discharge of water resource recovery facilities. And so you can kind of think of TCQ as like state level, whereas EPA is like federal. And so my day-to-day, it can depend on depending on what stage the project's at. And some days it's just like contacting people needing information, like, I don't know, pump information, or just like general equipment information. But I also do like construction management kind of stuff as well. I'll like look over shop drawings or RFIs, which are requests for information. So whenever there's a project that's in construction, it'll be a certain time frame, and so you have your contractor who will submit all of these, like, okay, well, these are the this is the equipment I want to use, this is the pipe I want to use. And so it's basically just going over like, do they meet all of the criteria? And so some days I'll do calculations or meetings, but everything just kind of will vary. Some days I don't really know what I'm getting myself into.
Wow, it sounds like so much, but like I feel like honestly might as well get into this, move towards. I feel like I might be interested just from hearing what like all of this, like your job seem like it's not repetitive. It's something, there's a new like problem for you every day that you just need to do, and it's not like a repetitive task like going to like being a like store manager, like doing the same thing every single day. It's not, I think, yeah. But it seems like Alan has a question. So Alan, just introduce yourself and your pronouns, please.
My name's Alan. My pronouns are he and him. One of my questions is that during your time working, do you sometimes feel like you always go in autopilot or no?
And Lindsay, you should start.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Like during your work, do you sometimes go on autopilot? Stefan, you want to explain more what's autopilot?
Yeah, I think what you're getting at, Alan, is that do you find yourself in this stage of where like you've been working for a while and then you like pull out of it and you're like, oh my gosh, hours have gone by and I've been doing the same thing. Like just that autopilot. You body knows what you're doing. It's basically a routine kind of thing. Is that right, Alan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in certain aspects, definitely. I mean, with enough experience, you kind of get more comfortable doing something and then you just go into autopilot. So like, for example, if I'm going to build a design schedule, let's say, like I'll know exactly how to do it. I'll just spend hours poring over it, but it doesn't like bore me, but it's not necessarily too challenging where I'm just frustrated. I'm just like working. And so I would say sometimes when the day does fly by like that, I appreciate those days because it doesn't seem like I'm on like work is a drag. Is that a question?
Alan, was that good for you?
Yeah, that was good.
Cool. Elaine?
I do feel like there are days when I'm on autopilot. So right now I'm considered an engineering in training, EIT. And so that means I do not yet have my PE, which is professional engineer. And so to be a PE in Texas, at least, it differs from state to state. You need a PE license, and so that requires taking a test and a certain number of years of experience. So I'll be getting my PE license in a few months. But me as an EIT, and even just being, just like if you started off only having a couple of years of being a PE under your belt, then there are like a lot of more so like mundane things that will happen from day to day, just because like your project manager will be like, okay, well, I need you to contact this people, I need you to do this for me. It's a little bit more like this and this. And so from there, that's when I'm like, okay, then I kind of branch off. And so some days there are those like autopilot days, but which like Lindsay was saying, those are nice. Like you appreciate those because you kind of want like a little hill, if that makes sense, in terms of how your workload is. Just because if it's always like on the top of the hill, then you're sort of always kind of like stressed and high strung. But once you kind of get over that hill, it's like it's a relief, So I do have those autopilot days, but I think that's something that's needed at every job, I think. And if you don't, then you'll probably burn out.
Right. You kind of want to feel like you're grooving and jiving in any position, but you also want to be challenged, right?
So to have that nice balance of both of them, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just like talking about hills, like the tallest mountain, like what's the biggest challenge that you had to overcome on your work and educational journey so far, and what steps have you taken to overcome them? And let's start with Elaine this time.
The question being my biggest challenge, like my biggest hill. That is a very tough question. I feel like personally for me, I work, as a designer, right? Or as in the consulting field designing stuff. And I say stuff, I shouldn't be saying stuff, but designing projects. And I feel like each time that there's a submittal, it's like I've like my stress levels are just like very high, just because it's like I'm like contacting people like, where are your drawings, like is everything ready? And then like some people will be like, yes, everything's all good, and then like last minute will be like, oh wait, we need to replace this drawing or something, and I'm just like, oh my goodness. So I
totally
feel like
understand how you feel.
Yeah. Every like submittal, I'm just like, oh, like work with me, please. So that's literally every single submittal, but it's not, and it's mostly, I think the signed and sealed submittals. That means that you have like the PEs, everyone that has their PE that is, that's taking part in the project, they're all signing their seals. And so that's like, this is final, it's, we're at 100%, it's going out to bid. Yeah, those are my high stress days, but it's not like it's not complicated work. It's, compiling things and hoping that like technology works with me.
All right, Lindsay.
Yeah, I guess, so the question is like the biggest challenge and what I did to overcome that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say just in general, engineering is problem solving, and that's basically at the core of what we do. Is like, we're presented with a challenge, we solve it. And so I would say like every day is sort of a challenge in itself. Some ways it's harder, and other ways it's a little easier. I would say maybe in terms of my career, the biggest challenge I think that I had was when I first started working in the field, I didn't really enjoy it, and I kind of wanted to quit and just change careers entirely. And I graduated during the recession, the 2008 financial crisis. And so I was basically lucky to even have a job at that point. And my sister encouraged me to stick with it. And I needed to change my mindset and realize that even though I didn't like that specific job that I was doing, I was still gaining those skills and those, and learning a lot of just different things to apply to the next job that I would apply for when that opportunity presented itself. And so how I overcame that, I had my sister as my support network, and I just had to change my mindset and work through it. And it didn't take that much longer for me to start enjoying actually what I was doing. So yeah.
All right, yeah, I see what you're saying. Just persevering and just going through the hardships. I see, but let's just move on and take a step back. Okay, the college days. I see. Okay, did you guys do any like clubs that involved like engineering or anything like that? Just like robotics club, that's a thing. I'm sorry, I'm just so into robotic stuff. But yeah, you just asking about that. All right, let's start with Lindsay this side.
Yeah, so in college, I actually wasn't in robotics, but I did intramural sports. I like to be active, so I played intramural softball, and but I also held various jobs. I mostly worked just to support myself during school, and I worked at a restaurant and worked at housing and dining services, and yeah. So I wasn't really in any engineering clubs, which I actually purposefully didn't join because I wanted to kind of diversify the things that I was doing in school versus just doing one thing.
Sounds good. Elaine.
Okay, so for me, when I was, in high school, I had a lot of people telling me like, you know, get involved, join clubs. And I'm assuming you guys have all heard that as well. You guys are nodding your head. Yeah. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll get involved. And so I, you know, was like looking through like as a freshman, I was kind of like looking through what organizations were there. And so at first I was like, yeah, Engineers Without Borders sounds really cool. And it is, but I feel like when I first went to that first like introductory meeting, I was like not super into it, you know? And so that almost like put me off from organizations, and I feel like it also kind of just put me off from organizations like related to engineering. But Engineers Without Borders is a great organization. Okay, it was just like, I feel like at my first introductory, like maybe it was just like the people, and I was just like an awkward kid. I still am, but I didn't join anything for like the next couple years, but then I joined Alpha Phi Omega, which is a volunteer organization. And I joined that for a semester, and I was like super involved. I was like top 10 in terms of like volunteer hours, which over a semester, I want to say that was like probably like 60 hours. It was a lot of time that I had spent volunteering. And that's just like one semester. It was, I believe it was my a spring semester. And so, but every year the dues are like at least over $100. And so that's something that put me off from them. And so I decided to take a step back from them. And I was part of American Society of Civil Engineers, ASCE. And I did concrete canoe, which I'm guessing maybe you've heard. I don't know, Lindsay.
I've heard of it.
Okay.
I mean, it's a really cool project if you have a chance to.
Yeah. And so I actually really only joined because my friend who was cool with like a professor was like, oh yeah, you should join. And so my friend was like, yeah, let's do this. And I'm like, okay. So it's just like going out on Saturdays and like paddling a canoe and going into these practices. So I was really like
But it's made of concrete, which is really heavy.
It's made of concrete. It's heavy. It's real heavy.
Do you have to build the canoes, or are they like, oh, you have to build it from, oh wow.
Yes, you have to build it from scratch. And we would practice with like a previous year's canoe. I want to say the canoe that we practiced in was probably like 300 pounds or something.
My God.
These are heavy canoes, but you know what? It's a challenge, right? And so they have different races. And so I ended up actually becoming, I don't know how this happened. I really like, so my first ASCE meeting that I went in late, and it ended up being it was like officer elections. And I ended up being elected on my first ASCE meeting, being elected to being a concrete canoe co-captain. I know. How did this happen? I don't know.
Peer pressure. And
it was a lot of peer pressure because I didn't walk up by myself. I was kind of pushed into the role.
All right, guys. So yeah, peer pressure is actually pretty good sometimes. It's always not that bad. Lesson learned. And to work during college, because it can benefit you.
Yeah, I worked during college as well. Okay, so sorry, concrete canoe, we're gonna stay on track. If I'm veering off track, let me know. So that was something that I did. We got second in Texas. So that was kind of cool. We were trying to get first. Yeah. And so another, I guess, like activity I did was I was part of Chi Epsilon, which is an honor society for like civil engineers and like civil engineering department. So environmental engineering, at least at Texas Tech, is part of the civil engineering department. We do like a lot of like water classes. So I was part of Chi Epsilon. I actually was a treasurer for a year, so that was cool. I actually got elected to that, for real. And then I also worked as a research assistant for a professor. And so the way I got that, so I was like talking to my advisor during, you like will talk to your advisor prior, like the semester before, or when you're about to like sign up for classes. And so I was like, do you, you know, and I wanted to like do something. And I had asked him if he knew of anyone that had any like open like student positions, and he was like, okay, contact these people. And I was like, okay, but I didn't want to contact all of them in case they all responded and were like yes, and I had to choose. So I just contacted one of them. And he actually had like that, so that this was, I want to say it was like April, and he had just come to that, he had just come from UT Austin to Texas Tech. He's like a world-renowned professor. I did not know any of this at the time. I just emailed him. He's like a world-renowned professor, researcher. People know his name. He's in so many references. And he was like, so I kind of like showed up the next day in his office because he, you know, he responded to my email, was like, yeah, come talk to me. And so I went to go talk to him, and it wasn't even really like an interview. It was sort of like him telling me what kind of stuff that they do in the lab, in the research labs, right? And I was like, I don't know if I got this position, but he walked me over to where like the research lab is, which was in another building. And I was like, I guess I got the position. So I worked in research for 3 years. Wow. So, and at Texas Tech, the environmental engineering department's like pretty small. When I say pretty small, just like in terms of like the student population. I want to say I graduated with like 12 or 13 students. Okay, and this was a spring graduation, meaning it's like a bigger graduation. Like a dozen students isn't very big for like a specific major. Environmental engineering, you do kind of, it's usually recommended to get a graduate degree as well. And so I was on a 5-year master's in environmental engineering program. And so I have a master's degree, FYI. I don't know if I made that clear. And so I graduated with like 12 or 13 people. I'm sorry, this is off track. I'm done.
But yeah, that was a really interesting story about the professor who turned out to be an international famous reference. Yeah, just send the email and maybe his name for the future, you know. But yeah, so from the last interview that I had, moving on, I interviewed Ben and Ben. It seems they were talking about how women were used as a public view for like the engineering industry, and it was put in a way where they were used for a public eye and wasn't really put in the lab, as you can say, like actually getting to do the work, but they were rather traveling and like going to meetings and being like, oh, I work for this and I am an engineer and I am a woman. So does this seem true to you? Like, if that made sense. I don't know if that made sense. If women were like put into the job just to become a representative. Yeah, for like the like. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where this is going, but yeah, it's like something like that, if you get it. But we can start with Lindsay.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that that's my experience. I would say that I was hired because I was qualified and I work hard and I get it done. I can see benefits to that. I mean, you know, there is a disparity between how much men and women are in the field of engineering. I mean, the numbers will show it. And so the more women that we can encourage to enter the field, the better. And I think, you know, sometimes that comes with marketing, of having a woman's face out there saying, hey, like, we hire women, and there isn't just men in the field. It just provides that outlook for women that aren't in the field to say, okay, this is an industry that I can see myself identifying with. But yeah, I think encouraging women also helps.
Great answer. All right, Elaine.
I personally don't, you know, I agree with Lindsay. I don't think I was hired to be like another face of the company. I'm not really sure if, you know, me being female and a non-white person contributed to me getting hired. I had a decent GPA, and I was like involved, and, you know, I was working. So I feel like I had a decent resume and, you know, job experience to really actually be hired. And what I do now, I don't feel like I feel like this would be something, you know, any sort of entry level engineer would be doing.
Yeah, I see that. And just going like back all the way to like the 1920s, like American, like women were just starting to get like a bigger role in the work industry, and it was a huge opportunity, of course. But moving forward to today, do you believe that it is easy for a woman to land a position in a engineering industry? Would it be an equal competition if you were to go up against a man for a job? And let's start with Elaine this time.
You know, for me to, what was the first part of your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah. If a woman is it easy for a woman to land a job in the engineering industry?
You know, I feel like a lot of it depends on the company. I've heard of a lot of companies that are, and this is just kind of like reading about, you know, different things online, which, you know, might be biased, but I feel like it depends on the company. And specifically for me, and I feel like I could probably go up against another guy. I do feel like, though, that I don't want to sound sexist or like I'm generalizing anything, but I do feel like a lot of guys are really cocky in a way that's off-putting. Thank you. And so I feel like that kind of gives them like let me take away a few brownie points from you. And so I feel like I could compete with like a lot of the guys. So yeah.
Lindsay, what about you?
I mean, it's a tough question.
Yeah.
I would say, I mean, there is gender bias sometimes in certain hiring processes, and it's an unfortunate, you know, world that we live in that exists. But it would be stupid for me not to acknowledge that it does exist. I mean, but of course, I would say that if I was truly qualified for a position that I qualified for, then I would be competitive regardless of what the gender of that person is.
That makes a lot of sense, and I hope that that's the way that all hiring managers hire from now on and continue to. We're going to be wrapping up in a couple minutes here, but I think this is your platform, right? Let's say you have about 20 seconds to 30 seconds to make your pitch to not just like students like Alan who wants to become an engineer, who are like really grasping for it, but for people potentially like Mary or Jennifer or Danya, who are just maybe don't know exactly what they want to do. Make your pitch. Why become an engineer, specifically a female engineer? Why is it something that you think that these students should go after? And let's start with Lindsay.
Oh, okay. Elevator pitch on why to choose engineering. Okay. Well, I would say first is it opens up a lot of opportunities on like a various amounts of work. And so I started with general engineering under the umbrella of civil engineering, which also just provides you that lots of different opportunities to do lots of different things. I would say for me, I thought this was pretty important is with civil engineering, there are avenues where you don't need your master's. And I didn't want to be in school longer than 4 years because that's expensive. So that was another good selling point. Another good selling point for me was I grew up in Hawaii, and in Hawaii, there's obviously lots of land that can be developed and available to be developed. And so I wanted to be a part of those decisions at the time. I live in Oregon now, but it's a fun thing to be in the industry in your city that's making the improvements in your city, and you can look outside your window and be like, oh, like I was a part of that project just down the street from where I live. So those top 3 things, there you go. Go engineering.
Spectacular. Thanks, Lindsay. And to you, Elaine.
So I agree with Lindsay that this is a stable job, and there is a lot that you can do with being an engineer. For example, me as an environmental engineer, we're sort of like public health engineers. So, for me, my sort of avenue is like the water industry, but there's also air, there's also like soil remediation, there's like remediation in general, there's compliance. And so there's all these different avenues that you can go into, and you don't necessarily have to stick with, transportation or land development or water. If you want to go into something else, you can. And, a lot of people will say engineering requires so much math, and you don't necessarily, not everyone wants to be like crunching numbers like, 40 hours a week, which, I definitely do not do that. That's, a very small portion of my actual job. And so I think, being an engineer is important. You can make a positive impact in people's lives. And that's, I don't necessarily need anyone to be thanking me every day, but it's nice to know that, like, I did that. I contributed to, making society like a better place. And also another good thing about, civil environmental is that it's a very, very stable industry. So I work in private industry, but if I wanted to, I could always go work for like a utility or something like that.
Thanks, Elaine. Really appreciate that. We're going to jump over here. If you look at my screen, I'm going to share with you. This is our time to reflect on today's informational interview. So if you can, jump into the chat bar. Should be either on the right side of your screen or a pop-up. And just like to hear a little bit from you. What did you learn from this interview that you're excited about? How can you use this information moving forward? If it's not your life, maybe someone else's life. Maybe you know someone who's like, I want to build bridges one day, or I want to XYZ, fill in the blank, right? This is a great experience and a great jump start for that. So think about these. And then the last part, if you can think of anything that we as Passion Impact can do, that Kayla can do, that myself can do, that Adriana the bouncer can do, please let us know. We'd like to make these a lot better in the future moving forward, always looking for improvement. With that being said, this is something that Kayla asked for, the joke.
Oh, yeah, I was going to go into that if you weren't going to
go for it. It's all you. It's all you.
Well, while everyone is writing their little wrap-up comments, how about we share some jokes? And let's start with Elaine.
Okay. Well, I believe you already know my joke, Kayla. But,
don't worry, I can fake laugh. I mean, laugh.
So what do you get if you have a constipated, honey-loving bear? Winning the poo.
I'll take that.
Uh,
And Higa,
I
you
can't
got
top that. That's gold.
you got a joke though. You got to say it still.
yeah, I liked it.
All right. Well, this is related to the topic, which is engineering, but some say the optimists say the glass is half full. The pessimist says the glass is half empty. Well, the engineer says that the glass is twice as big as it needs to be.
Yeah.
Woo!
I'm here all day, folks.
Yes,
Oh my
and
gosh.
as you're filling out your answers, please go ahead and fill out that poll. There should be, it's just a question about how you heard about the event, and while you're doing that, and people have been submitting answers. See, Alan says, I learned that civil engineering can branch out to many other sectors, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, Alan. I'm sure that both Lindsay and Elaine don't know the entire extent of their industry, so you could probably dig for days on that one. Jennifer says, yep, like Alan, I learned that there's many branches of the engineering field. Absolutely. Danya, what I learned from this information that's exciting is that it's constantly problem solving, then a simple routine, not like other careers that are a routine. Fantastic. There is always a problem to be solved, and what's great about engineers is they constantly find problems to solve. So let's thank them for all they've done. See, Alan also says, I can change my profession. I have more interviews. Nice. Mary, I learned that there are many, many, many different paths you can take in engineering. Also, sorry for thinking you were Mafia for Friday's game, Elaine. Oh, that's so bad.
Oh my god, that was so funny. I wondered who. Oh wait, who killed me? It was. I don't remember, but I got killed.
If you have any other things that you've learned, feel free to put them in there. Obviously, these are for you. But with that, we'd like to extend a massive gratitude. So if you could turn off the mutes, that'd be great. Just if you want to look at this next week, this week, we got a bunch of stuff coming up. On Wednesday, we have a informational interview with Higa and Brian, and they're both lawyers. So if you want to learn about that, or you know someone who does, come and join them.
Might want to chime in on that one.
By all means, you're more than welcome to. Stay fit on Wednesday with Christina and Kayla from 12 to 1. We have article discussions tomorrow at 12 to 1. And then on Friday, we've got games with Mary and Alan. Subscribe to our newsletter here at the bottom. Find out more about our teleprogramming at the top.
And leave a comment.
Leave a comment. Thank you, Elaine and Lindsay. Y'all are fantastic humans.
Yeah.
Really
You're fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun.